Welcome back. In this video, we're going to finalize the UI, which means we just need to add these text views here, these 4 buttons or text views. I'm going to use text views, but they will be treated like buttons, so to speak. And then we have this submit button. So let's go ahead and implement the missing pieces. And therefore, I will add a bunch of text views, and then I'm going to go over what they do. Because as I said, I'm going to use text views here and not actual buttons. So you see we have this scroll view in which we have a linear layout, So these are the closing tags, right? And I want to add the text views underneath this linear layout, which contains the progress bar. Okay, so, and what's important, it has to be in the outer parent linear layout. So this is where I will put my text views, and I will need to add the options here. So I'm going to paste the code here and just give you and run through what's happening here. So first of all, we need to have this text view with an ID, and I'm going to call this one TV option 1. Then I will need another one with option 2. So this one will be option 2. Then I need another one, option 3. And then finally option 4. Okay, so I have all of these options now. And now let's run over what is actually happening here. So first we have the ID, then we say the width should be the entire width that is available for its parent. Then it's wrapping the content in terms of height. There is a little bit of margin towards all directions, so distance towards all directions. And I'm going to use this background, which will be a drawable that we don't have yet, which is why I get this error, and we're going to create it in a second. I center the text, so I'm using gravity centered here, which means that the text will now be in the center. Then I'm adding padding, which creates this distance between the text and the edge, so to speak. And then we have the text color, which is this light gray, as well as the text size, which is 18sp. So now let's create this drawable. Therefore, you can hover over it. And by the way, to create that, you just need to create, well, in this case, I'm creating it for the background, which means the background property. And I'm just saying add drawable slash, and then whatever name you give it here, once you do that, it will turn red and this will be an error, but you can then go ahead and hover over it and create a drawable resource file, which will have that exact same name. So let me just do that. I'm going to leave it as it is. So this just creates a new resource file for me. And you can then also look at your resources. It will be under the drawables folder. So default option border bg.xml. So this file was just created for me by the IDE, so by Android Studio. So what is it that I want to do here? So first of all, I'm going to make it a shape. So let's change that to shape. And inside of this shape, I want to define what kind of shape it's actually going to have. So the property, and this has to be here inside the opening bracket. So here I can define the shape, and you see you can select line, oval, rectangle, and ring. And I'm going to use rectangle. So this will be a rectangular shape. And then inside of this shape, I want to have a stroke. Okay, so here adding a stroke, which is just going to be a line. And the stroke will have a width of 1 density pixel, and it will have a color of, let's use E8, E8, E8. Okay, so this is going to be my stroke. Let me close that up. So this was the stroke, which means the line. And now I want to have a background. And the background should be a solid background. So I'm just going to use the color of white. Okay, so color white. And then I finally just need to add corners, which will allow me to have this rounded edge. You see here, it's rounded. Okay, and that's what I want to have here. So corners with a radius of 5 density pixels. So that's it. So once we have that, we go over to our questions activity XML, and you see the errors have disappeared, and we can now check out our design, and we will see that it is rounded. We have this gray border as well as a white background. So let's run this real quick just to see how this is going to look like. Okay, so let's go over to the next screen, and we see here that we have our text views / buttons. Of course, they're empty because there's nothing in there, but we're going to set that up in this video also, so that at least it will be populated with a question. Okay, so now finally we just need to add a button underneath all of those text views. Okay, so let's just add this button, which is just going to be a default button. Let me just add it in here. And it will be inside of the linear layout still and underneath this text view. So this button, I'm going to call it button submit. It will have a width of match parent, a height of wrap content, a margin of 10, so a little distance towards all directions. And I want to use the primary color. So let's see how we can get that. Design color primary. So this one will be this purple color that we have. So the naming convention has changed a little bit ever since I created this code. So you see here, design default color primary is working for me, but you can just use any color you want. And then as the text, I'm going to set that to submit all in caps. The text color will be white, as well as the text size 18 SP and the text style being bold. So if we check it out now, we can see that we have this submit button here at the bottom, which will then generate the button as I want to have it. So let's look at it once it's created. So here you see this is going to be the submit button. All right, so now let's populate the data, which means populate those text views so that they are usable. And we are in the questions activity there. That's what we created this XML for. So we need to set up all of the items that we want to access. So all of the views, so the text views, the image view, the progress bar, all of that needs to be added. Okay. Therefore, we can use find view by ID for all of them. This will be a little bit of effort, but that's how it has to be done unless you're using view binding, which we don't do at this point of the course, but we will be using view binding later on. So let's set up all of the items that we need. So private var progress bar, which will be of type progress bar. Okay. So this will be a nullable. So I'm going to assign null to it. And let's check it out. Progress bar has been automatically added for me. So Android widget has been imported with the progress bar. Then I'm going to require the text view progress. So there's this progress bar, but also this text view that we used as well. So it's this little text view. I need to access it as well because I want to change the number that is displayed. So let's import text view. You see here with Alt Enter, by the way, I added the text view. And now we will need to do the same thing for the question. So private var TV question, which will be of type text view optional as well, or nullable. And then the image. So private var IV image. So in image view image. And this was an image view optional. And I'm going to assign null to it. And we need to import image view for this as well. So here you see the import has been done. And now I need to have the 4 options. Okay, so I'm just going to copy them in here. You see text view option 1, which is of type text view nullable, and option 2, option 3, and option 4. So now inside of the onCreate method, here we can set up all of the user interface items. So we can just say, okay, the progress bar can be found via its ID. So find view by ID r.id.progress bar. That's how we call it. The TV progress, so the text view progress, can also be found by its ID r.id.tv progress. That's how we call it. And you can, by the way, if you don't know what that is, you can just hold the control key, click into it, and you will see that it jumps directly to this element in the code as well. So here, this is the TV progress, which is saying 0 out of 9. Okay. And accordingly, we need to do the same thing with the question. So TV question is going to be found by its ID r.id.tv_question. So it's super boring, I know, but we have to do it. And well, yeah, of course we have to do the same thing with the image view and all of the other views. So you can just try this by yourself. Just pause the video and set this up with all of the items. All right. So now let me do that with the text view options as well here. Find them by their ID, and that will be pretty much it. So now we have this question, right? And before we use this log entry to see how much we have in terms of questions. So now let's just go ahead and run through a for loop, which will then give me the questions. So I want to have the individual questions, and therefore we'll use this for loop, which will display the log. Well, I'm using the error log entry. So I is information. I'm going to use error, which will turn it red. So just for you to see how it's going to look like. And I'm going to give it the tag of questions. And then I'm going to call this i.question, or I'm going to use i.question. So what is i.question? So I is going to be the individual question inside of the questions list. You can, of course, also give it a more descriptive name, something like question, but then it would look like question.question. So either way, so this I is the individual question inside of this questions list, because this questions list contains questions, okay? And we are getting the individual question of the question. So the question is the object type or the data class, and then the question is the actual question with a lowercase q is the actual question that we want to display. So that's what we are going to do with this log entry here. So for now, let's see if we get that. So let's start it, and the UI will not be updated, but let's look at the logcat now and search for questions. And we will see all of the questions. So what country does this flag belong to? What country does this flag belong to? So not very interesting details that we get here, but the good thing is now we can go ahead and use those questions to set them up, as well as the text view for the question that we are at. So val question will give us the current question, which will be of type question. And I'm going to get it from my questions list. As we know, this questions list contains all of the different questions that we have, and we got it from the constants here. So it's this questions list, right? Which is an array list of individual questions. And I can now get the current position, and let me get the current position, which will and of course I will need this current position. So let's go ahead and create a variable called current position. I'm going to set that to 1. It's complaining that it's a var, but we're going to overwrite this, and I'm going to get that -1. So what does that mean? Well, we are starting at the position 1, and then we're going through the individual positions. Now you could of course also say start with the current position 0 and then go through the questions list like so. This would work as well. So now this will give us the individual question that we are currently looking at. Now the question itself is cool and all. We can now use it, and we can assign the question to our text view questions, right? So here we have the question, but we can also go ahead and first of all set the progress bar. Okay, progress bar is a nullable, so we need to add the question mark here, and we set the progress of the progress bar to be the current position. And here you can already see why I would not like to set current position to 0, but we will change that in a second. And then we have the TV progress to display the text of the current position, and then a slash sign. So here current position with a slash, and then the progress bar dot max value. And the progress bar is a nullable, so we need to add the question mark. Okay, so that's what I want to display here, and maybe without empty spaces in between. All right, so that's the TV progress bar. Now let's set up the question, and the question itself will be a nullable, or is a nullable, so we need to set the text with a question mark. So here question.question. So here we get the actual question of the question object. So let's test this for now. Let's see how this is going to look like. And we see what country does this flag belong to, and we see we are at 0 out of 9. So that's why I'm not happy with using the 0, and that's why we should use the current position being 1 and the -1 here, which allows us to still start at position 0. So the array list will start at 0. So right, it starts counting at 0, and we want to start with the first question, which is why we need to use current position -1, because current position is 1, and we need to pass 0 here as we are starting with the first question. So now that's the text view that we are setting up for the question, and now we need to set the text views for all of the options. So here, question dot option 1, and of course I need to add the dot here, and then we need to do the same thing with the option 2. So text will be question dot option 2, and so forth. Okay, so it's the same with option 3 and option 4, and you can see now we have all of the questions ready. Let's test it and see if we are gonna get the actual options here. So Argentina, Australia, Armenia, Austria, and the submit button. All right, now the one thing that is the most interesting one, I believe, is missing, and that is the image. So let me add the image here, and actually let me add it all the way before the progress bar. So iv image dot set image, and here you can find different ways of assigning an image. And what is it that we have? So do we have a bitmap? Have we stored a bitmap, or have we stored an integer? Well, we have stored an integer, because if we look at our question here, the image is stored as an int. Okay, so we can now set the image resource with its ID, and we get it from question.image. So we are now accessing this image property of our question object and setting it as the image resource for our IV image, which is our image view, which internally, if we look at it here, is this image view, which currently has the German flag in it. So let's run it again, and let's see if it's going to display it. And you can see that it shows Argentina, which is exactly correct, because the first question, if we look at our constants, was in fact the Argentinian flag. So what country does this flag belong to? Now we see Argentina, Australia, Armenia, and Austria. And that is our question 1. So you see this user interface pretty much works already. We see the question, we see the progress bar, we see the text view of the progress bar displaying the right values, and we see the different options. Of course, nothing works here. We can click any of the text views, but that's what we're going to cover later in this section. So see you in the next video.